All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Josh from Trio Academy. Thank you for joining us. This is our first episode of the Classical Music Podcast, and we have our wonderful guest here, Dr. Matthew Bachman, and he'll be talking with our one of our Trio's faculty, Dr. So. So we'll welcome them in now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's so good to see you.
Good afternoon to you, Isaac. It's wonderful to see you as well.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the Classical Music Podcast, Episode 1. You are our first guest, and it's wonderful to have you here, even during the COVID-19. And with our wonderful technology, we're able to learn so much about what's going on, about you as a artist, teacher, and the representative of Steinway Sons. So we have just many things to talk about. So anyway, just a little bit background about you, if I may. Dr. Matthew Bachman is a solo and collaborative pianist, teacher, music educator, piano technician, French horn player, and Steinway Sons representative. And also, you wear many, many hats. You're a gifted and multifaceted musician. And if bear with me. So in 2006, Dr. Bachman made his orchestra solo debut with the Susquehanna Symphony Orchestra, performing Schumann's Piano Concerto in A minor, and later that year performed Beethoven's Choral Fantasy with the University of Maryland Symphony Orchestra and Choir. As an active chamber musician, Matthew is pianist with Trio Simpatico, a unique chamber group that performs rarely heard compositions for piano, clarinet, and French horn. And as an educator, Dr. Bachman maintains an active teaching studio of gifted young students, professionals, and adult enthusiasts in the greater Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. In 2007, he served as chair for the peer jury of the 2007 William Kapell International Piano Competition. Well, once again, I mean, that's a handful, that's a lot. So welcome again.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so this is our first podcast, and I have many things I would like to ask you. So one of the things that, as I was studying a little bit about your background, even though we met a long, long while ago in the back at the University of Maryland, there's a very interesting news article about a news from University of Maryland. It says, "The Road to Steinway. Piano alumnus Matthew Bachman turns businessman," and this was published December 2019. So that is very interesting to us. And so before asking anything in details, so what is this about?
So I had been in touch with the University of Maryland for many years in many different capacities. I actually received all 4 of my degrees from University of Maryland, and Dr. So was one of my teaching assistants when I was an undergrad, and it was wonderful to reconnect recently with her. That article, University of Maryland was interested in talking with me about my experiences because they are very much interested in how they can provide a career path for students after they graduate. And so one of the things that was really the goal of that article, I think, was to show that in 2020, it is not necessary that if you have degrees in music all the way up to a terminal degree in music, to the doctoral level, that your career exists only on stage or that it exists only in the teaching studio, but that it is possible to have many different avenues that you can pursue.
That's definitely very important to the students, especially music. And I really believe that right now, especially with COVID situation, the most important concern is finding a career path that would immediately we consider music and art and performance kind of not as essential as other areas. But I do believe that having these options of being able to wear different multifaceted hats are very, very important part of everyone today. And I think that's very interesting. And yes,
I think that it's something that's very crucial for anybody who is considering a career in the arts, especially during this time, that there are so many ways that you can apply your skill set. The skill set that we develop as musicians in problem solving, in learning repertoire, in performing. in being able to present yourself as somebody who is unique and has something to say. That's a skill set that can be applied in any medium. And I think that along with the intrinsic value of making music and studying music, that's just an added bonus that can be translated to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're musicians and we're growing up, but going really back to your childhood, we're always fascinated by how did you start in music, or was it your first piano experience? How did you start in music?
So I was the most shy kid that you could ever meet, and I was not athletic. I grew up in rural Harford County, Maryland, which ironically I've made my way back to now as a young father. And the piano was something that I found was a place that and music in general, was something that I could find my voice and something that I could express myself with. And there was a piano in the house from my earliest memories. And I was both blessed and cursed to have, if there is such a thing, perfect pitch. So I was able to go in and figure out how to play tunes that I'd heard even before having a piano lesson. And I found that very satisfying. As this evolved into something that I wanted to do more seriously and wanted to look at vocationally, there was a great aunt of mine who was a graduate of the Peabody Conservatory, one of your alma maters. And she had been the only professional musician in the family up to that point. But I found myself, as I continued through secondary school, being drawn more and more to just a pure love of sound. And I had the unique experience and privilege to have studied both piano and French horn with equal intensity. My younger years, I actually started piano and French horn within 3 days of each other, and continued active performing and study of both through my master's degree. But it was just an absolute love of sound and a love of the ability to communicate with people in a level that words just didn't always have the ability to do. But I think drew me into studying music and pursuing it.
So you grew up with playing many different instruments. You say you started with piano, and just very short distance you studied horn.
Yes.
So were you involved in any school or let's say school band or jazz band or any of that? Marching band, maybe, I don't know.
Marching band is one of those things that we try to forget sometimes. Not that there's anything wrong with marching band, but for a French horn player, it's not your favorite place that you're performing. It doesn't feel so good on the face. But no, I would say that the ability to have crossed over into so many worlds as a pianist and a French horn player growing up, that was something that really set the stage for me having an understanding of the importance of versatility moving into the music field. And in regards to playing in school ensembles and orchestras, youth orchestras, some of my longest lasting friendships came out of those experiences. And I met my wife on the high school marching band field. So I guess there's something to be said for high school marching band.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you're high school sweethearts.
Well, that's an interesting story too. So I remember the first time meeting my wife was a saxophone player who walked in front of me on the marching band field. And I thought to myself, who is that? And actively pursued her all throughout high school. She dated all of my best friends. She dated the lead trumpet in the brass quintet that I played with both in high school and in undergraduate. But I think I won in the end. We were married. We're coming up on our 15th wedding anniversary this fall.
Well, that's wonderful. So, all of us, we have one or two mentors or a teacher or somebody who would have very significant influence on our growth as a musician. How about for you? Do you have any influential teacher or mentor of you becoming a professional musician?
Two mentors that I would say really, in my younger years, had the biggest impact on me. Scott Charnetzka, who was my high school band director. There was a 20-year period, 30-year period where there was a disproportionately high number of professional musicians coming out of the area that I grew up in. And he was somebody that had a lot to do with that. He was a phenomenal trumpet player, had been the second trumpet player with the Annapolis Brass Quintet, which in the brass world at the time was quite big. That was right around the same time that the Canadian brass and the Empire brass and the American brass quintet were all coming onto the performing music stage. And he was somebody that really set an excellent example for what it would be to be the performer, to be the educator, and for me, something that was equally important, somebody who could balance all of that and be a good father and a good husband. So he was somebody that I can point to in those early years that for sure pointed me in the direction of a career in music. And in piano, there was a wonderful professor of piano at Towson University that I studied with during my high school years named Ronaldo Reyes. And he was somebody that challenged me in a way that no other teacher had. And I think gave me some of the discipline and the mettle that's necessary if you're going to pursue a career in the arts.
So who are some of the composers you like to play? Any of the instruments you like? What?
That's like asking me to choose which of my children is my favorite. But I have to say that of the composers that, I very much find myself drawn to the Romantic and the Baroque periods. Composers of specific interest to me, Brahms and Schumann, both their works speak to me greatly, and they were the focus of my doctoral dissertation, which was a recorded project, Schumann and Brahms' mutual influences, which was a lot of fun.
So in terms of you also, you wear many hats, we talked about that, and you're also an educator. And I see it that you actually work with helping many students. So as a teacher, how do you build or how do you support, how do you support those students to really use music to really grow up or enhance their lives?
I'd say that one of the things that I find right now that is the most important thing to focus on in my teaching is to teach somebody how to fish, rather than to hand them a fish. It was the way that I was taught, was rather than being told there was only one way to do things, even though many of those teachers did have only one way that they wanted in the end, they at least allowed you the process of being able to figure it out. I think that teaching people how to learn, teaching people skill sets that they can apply not just to the piece of music or the instrument they're playing in the time that they're with you, but teaching them the concept of, okay, what is the big picture for this? How do I break this down into smaller sections? How do I use every tool that I have at my disposal to get this accomplished as well and as efficiently as possible? That, I think, is that concept is one of the key components of having a successful teaching studio. You can create a lot of, when you listen to students and you listen to competitions today, the level of pianism, the level of technique on virtually every instrument is the highest that it's ever been. But if you can teach a student how to practice efficiently, how to learn efficiently, that's going to benefit their studies in music immensely. It's also going to benefit them as human beings immensely. I think that when we watch how musicians have responded during this very difficult time, as we face the COVID crisis, innovation, excellence, tenacity, these are things that are formed in the teaching studio and are passed on from teacher to student, and that's where the seeds are planted.
I've been thinking about being a musician in this difficult time, especially in the area of a classical musician. There are many musicians and parents who would really want their children to go onto the field of music, but the model, the way we earn a living is changing rapidly, especially from 20th century to 21st century, as you mentioned a little bit of before. So for those parents who say, I love music, but Dr. Bachman, I'm afraid to push my children into that field because there is a cliche of struggling musician. Now, what do you think about that? Would you actually, if somebody, or let's say your son say, Dad, I want to be a musician, what would you say to that?
So that's a question that does come up very, very frequently. If music is in your blood, there is absolutely no denying it. And I think that for parents who have children who have demonstrated that aptitude, to deny them the chance to pursue that to its fullest is to deny them a very important part of their growth as a human being and their growth as a future citizen of the world. What that looks like in terms of a career path in any field, whether it's music, whether it's education, whether it's business, you have to have something about yourself that is unique. You have to have something about what you do that you do better than anybody else, or at least you feel that it's something unique that you can contribute to the larger landscape. So to the parents who have children, and what I would say to my son, if he came to me and said, Dad, I'm going to major in music, is that's fantastic. You are pursuing something that is universal. You are pursuing something that will make you a better person. You're pursuing something that if music is introduced into anybody's lives, there's no way that it's going to do anything other than make them a better human being. And in terms of the career path, what that looks like, how one can make a living, to be very blunt about it, you have to be creative. In 2020, there are so many different avenues that one can take in any field. But in music, the axiom that a performance degree means that you're going to be playing in a symphony orchestra, that you will be performing 52 minimum solo concerts per year. I think that that's a construct that we're hurting ourselves by thinking that that's a reality for what a career in music looks like. I think that developing skill sets and being able to figure out what your brand is, what it is that you can offer, be it as a teacher, be it as a performer, that's unique. I think that that's the way that you find a career in music. And I think, as I said, the skill set that you acquire studying music is universal. There's a reason why when medical school admissions boards are looking at undergraduate degrees, they enjoy interviewing candidates who have a liberal arts background. They know that they're bringing that part of their brain that is wired to think outside of the box and think creatively.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you talked about the brain wiring, because I remember seeing a clip on TED Talk about how musicians, their wiring just like fireworks goes on. So music, learning music and being a musician actually has a tremendous positive effect on growing brain in every way, in which field you decide to go. It's a very important area.
It is one of the very few things that engages all parts of the brain.
Absolutely.
It is an intellectual pursuit. It is a spiritual pursuit. And it's something that requires a tremendous amount of physical ability, dexterity, and concentration.
Oh, absolutely. So what was interesting to me that you also have a graduate assistantship in piano technology. So I read someplace that your dream was to own a Steinway. That's everybody's dream, I think. So please, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into piano technology and what is exactly piano technology, and a little bit about that.
So interestingly, that assistantship was a fluke. That assistantship was something that in any other year that I would have been auditioning may not have been an opportunity, but I'll back up a little bit and get to that. I have always been as fascinated by the instrument of piano as much as I have been by the music that was written for it. And the first piano that I remember as a child falling in love with was a Baltimore piano, a Charles M. Steve, that has lived in my grandparents' house from 1907 and is still in that room today. And I always wanted to take it apart. Much to the consternation and fear of my grandparents. And I come from a family of engineers, so there's a little bit of that mechanical questioning that I suppose is innate. But every time that my parents would schedule to have the piano technician come to my home, I would always make sure that they would do it when I was home from school, because I wanted to see and hear how it was done. And the technician that my parents were contracting with when I was growing up was also a phenomenal musician, a wonderful pianist himself who had trained at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Great Britain and was a fantastic composer, and somebody who found a career path that allowed him to pursue his art and support his family. And I remember having many conversations with him while he was working on the piano about piano tone, about philosophies of tuning and things like that. And I noticed that he started to use an electronic tuning device to aid his tuning while I was talking to him. And I remember asking him, Preston, does it bother the machine when I'm talking? And he says, it doesn't bother the machine. So he very graciously engaged a young Matt in conversation that fostered a love of the instrument and an understanding of the mechanics of it. The piano technology assistantship at University of Maryland, as you know, University of Maryland is an all Steinway school. And when they became an all Steinway school, they created an assistantship in piano technology. And any other year, I would have received a teaching assistantship based off of my audition. But that particular year, there was a wonderful doctoral student that you probably remember, Aldo Rigone, phenomenal Italian pianist and teacher, that needed to stay an extra year. And if he did not have that assistantship, his visa was going to be revoked. So the piano technology assistantship was offered to me, and without hesitation, I said yes. So that was one of those things that that was a career-defining and life-defining moment, accepting that assistantship, but I didn't realize it at the time. At the time, I thought, hey, they're going to teach me how to tune Steinways. They're going to pay me to go to school. They're going to give me medical benefits. And this was the same year that I got married to my wife. So this was something that, to a 22-year-old performance student, was very attractive. That assistantship led me to start thinking outside of the box of what I wanted to do in my studies. Originally, I had thought, just as I think anybody who pursues a DMA or PhD, I think that the intention when you begin that degree is that I'm going to land a university or a conservatory teaching job. And right when I was entering my DMA and still had the same assistantship for the doctoral studies, was right when the Great Recession hit. And so everybody's 401k was crashing. Teachers were not retiring, understandably and justifiably so. But for young professionals graduating with those degrees, there was a shortage of job opportunities. So being an all Steinway institution and having that background in piano technology actually pointed my career trajectory more towards the industry side of things. And that's how, in a way, we're having this interview today.
You know, that leads right to what's going on nowadays. And as I was reading about the background of Steinway, since 1853, Steinway is still around. It's been through, as you say, recession. It's been through riots. It's been through World War. And we're still here. And Steinway is making these wonderful innovations coming up. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about the stereo piano. And we're all excited, really, about the stereo piano.
Yeah.
So actually, you gave a little lecture on a cultural force for innovation and excellence, right? So something about the innovation, and I want to ask you, what exactly is a stereo piano? And as you know, the Kirov Academy is sponsoring the world's first virtual international junior competition featuring the stereo piano. So I've been asked, what is stereo anyway? Where does it come from? So people are curious, but they're not really sure what does it do. So can you tell us a little bit about the stereo piano?
So stereo is the culmination and what Steinway's commitment to excellence and innovation looks like in 2020. So something that, as you mentioned, most people don't realize is Steinway has been making pianos in perpetuity since 1853. And what's so amazing about that is that, for me, it's amazing to work with and represent a company that has survived 2 world wars, has survived every economic downturn that you can imagine. This is a company that goes back to having riots due to draft policies in the Civil War. And there's some fascinating stories about how the Steinway family handled that. But from the very beginning, the vision of the company was to build the very best piano possible and to build a piano that engaged artists in a way that no other could. And from Steinway's very early years, there was just a depth of sound and a precision and a synergy between the performer and the instrument that quality has made it the preferred instrument of performers for more than a century and a half now. Stereo is Steinway's way of moving that commitment into the 21st century and how we continue to be at the cutting edge of what's going on in the world of piano. So stereo is Steinway's high resolution re-performance piano. So what does that mean? Player pianos are something that have been around for a century now. And a century ago, player pianos were cutting edge technology. They were the most advanced piece of machinery that man had come up with at that point in time. Stereo is a 21st century version of that. It is a piano that can record and capture every nuance of a performer's intention. It does that through, and we can go as deep into the weeds for the actual mechanics of that as you like, but I'll save that and let you guide the conversation. But it's something that it captures the essence of what an artist can do on a Steinway in a way that nothing else can. It's, for me, the first time that I had the opportunity to record on one and step back and listen to myself, it's the first time that I actually heard myself play the piano. We've all heard ourselves on tape, on CD, but this was the first time that I heard my sound. I heard my articulation. I heard my concept coming back to me through a Steinway.
So some people who may not be familiar with maybe acoustic piano, and nowadays electric piano or keyboards are kind of popular. Yes, everyone has a keyboard, and even at my school we have 32 MIDI keyboards, and that's it. So if somebody can say, what's a big deal, Dr. Bachman? If you say you're hearing back, we could record it on our iPhone or just upload it on YouTube and we could hear it back, is fine. What's a big deal? What does it make such a special thing about stereo piano playback?
So the difference between experiencing a piano in person versus experiencing a piano over any kind of recorded sound, which is what a digital piano is. It's actually something that measures the speed of the key moving and pairs it with either a pre-recorded sample or a computer-generated projection of what the sound would be. The way that an acoustic piano works is that when you press the key down, the hammer comes up and strikes the string. The string vibrates, and the vibrations of those strings are then transmitted into what's called a sounding board. And the sounding board acts as a giant loudspeaker for what's coming out of the piano. So what stereo does is, opposed to what a traditional recording device would do, which captures and then interprets the way that the sound waves are moving through the air via microphone, stereo is actually capturing everything that is happening mechanically inside of the piano. And then in turn, recreating that, and the piano itself is creating the sound again. So what the big deal is that you are capturing the soul of a performance through stereo in a way that is not possible through traditional recording techniques.
So, we know that Yamaha, this clavier, also have the player piano system, and they've been developing them for a while. How is Steinway's stereo piano differ from Yamaha's this clavier?
So the main difference is that it is on a Steinway. The ability of a Steinway to explore color, to explore sound, it's not that there aren't other pianos out there that are well made and that are beautiful, but I think that if you ask any pianist what their feelings about Steinway are, they will say that the first thing that comes to mind for them is the sound that it produces and the connection that they feel to that when they sit at the keyboard. What makes stereo different than anything else out there is that the technology that's integrated into that piano is on a Steinway. And so you are capturing all of the artistic vision of the player on the piano that they intended to make their art with and to explore sound on.
This is really exciting for us because as the first international virtual junior competition, as we're using the stereo piano, what's possible now that we haven't really thought about it even decades ago or 10 years ago is that during the competition, many of our students, in normal cases without the COVID, they would all gather physically in one space and the juries will hear them. Now, that's not possible during this period due to really unfortunate events, very challenging for everyone in the world. So what's making it very interesting is that students are going to go to different Steinway halls with a stereo piano, perform on the piano, send their files to wherever jury is. So for us, it's exciting that we're going to have a jury in Seoul, Korea, and then we're going to have a jury listening to the same performance from the live actual acoustic stereo piano, the US judges, and we're able to do something that was not even possible to even think of, before this amazing piano. So in your opinion, how do you see the future? How do you see even the simple, not only the competition, but with education? How do you see the stereo piano changing the way we listen, the way we learn, the way we deal with the music, especially related to the keyboard technology?
I think that it's going to be absolutely game-changing for piano pedagogy and for the way that we think about preserving and curating piano performances. As you said, the competition that Kirov is holding, and we're very excited to be a part of that. The Spirio is making it possible for you to continue and have the music go on during this time. The ability to have judges sitting literally on the other side of the world and hear every nuance of what the performer, what the contestant is trying to convey to them, that actually makes it a real competition. That actually makes it possible for the person who is listening to be able to evaluate quantitatively and qualitatively what they are hearing. And there's a level of authenticity to the performance that you just simply could not get if we were dealing with a traditional video recording only for a competition. And Steinway recognizes that this is a chance for a much broader audience to experience what piano is and what piano can is possible to do on. We are able to curate the great performers of today, from Lang Lang and Yuzhou Wang. We've been trying to get Mr. Pressler to come in, and he's very much looking forward to having some work, I understand, recorded on the Spirio. It is a chance to preserve artistry in a way that was not possible before. We look back to very scratchy, very grainy recordings of Rachmaninoff, of Gershwin, to get a sense of what their pianism was like. One of the other things that Spirio can do, and it's something that I think is very interesting pedagogically, is that the technology exists to reverse engineer those recordings into the high resolution Spirio format so that you can actually listen to a Steinway in 2020 and hear George Gershwin play I've Got Rhythm. You can listen to Vladimir Horowitz make his triumphant Carnegie Hall recital return, performing Scriabin. For me as a pianist, Horowitz was one of my heroes growing up, and I know that recording inside and out. And the first time that I heard the Spirio play it back, I just had goosebumps and was speechless. The artistic possibilities for that and what that means for future generations of people who love piano music, it's just incalculable. And Steinway has invested tremendous amounts of capital and time and resources to make this possible. And for me as a pianist, I think it's tremendously exciting.
And I really think it's quite an amazing that we live in this century, 21st century, where we can experience this. And also our artistic director, Dr. Lee, she went to the Steinway Hall in Seoul, Korea, and she was able to hear Horowitz play. Yeah. And she felt his spirit right in the room. And she said that was a really shocking experience. She never thought hearing the acoustics of exactly the way he performed was a really mind-boggling experience. And I think as we have our Kirov Academy, our goal is to really continue the trend and keep the tradition of this wonderful the Western music and the piano music and repertoire. And this is a way we can capture, learn from the previous masters, even though they may or may not be physically here, but we could still hear their spirit.
Something that spoke to me very early on as to how game-changing this technology is. We were giving a presentation on Stereo, and one of the performances that happened in the past that we can experience through Stereo now is also Horowitz's return recital in Moscow.
Oh.
And afterwards, a young lady came up and had tears running down the side of her face. And one of the performances that we had that evening was of Träumerei. Horowitz, who played that like no other, could certainly pull on the heartstrings like no other with that piece. And she said, I was there at that recital in 1986. And that was how Mr. Horowitz sounded in the hall, and thanked us profusely for giving her the chance to relive that formative experience. She's a regular substitute violinist with the National Symphony, this woman. So yeah, it's very exciting and thrilling that Kirov is going to be a part of that.
This is going to be my last question. So some audience listening to our conversation may say, well, it sounds very complicated. It sounds too technical. It's going to sound beautiful, and we can hear all this playback, but it sounds too complicated. Is it really complicated to work? And I know that Spear uses, iPad. So how does it work for those people who have no idea anything about this? So could you just go through just simple steps, what it takes?
It's as the old Apple marketing campaign used to go, there's an app for that. Stereo is controlled by an iPad. Everything works through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. It literally is no more difficult to have the Stereo piano recreate Horowitz in your living room than to push play on iTunes within an Apple device. So the technology that goes into it is extremely complex. But how it works for the person who's using it, both recording on it as an artist and listening to it as an audience member, as a prospective owner, as anybody who's experiencing a Steinway Stereo, it's as simple as pressing a button.
Well, it sounds like it's not something that's too complicated. I was not very good at programming, and so when you first heard about the Stereo, is it going to be difficult? But it sounds something.
If you can use an iPad, you can use a Stereo. And a good friend of mine who was fortunate enough to actually purchase the Stereo right before the COVID crisis and has had it playing 24 hours a day nearly during this time of quarantine. She said to me, and she's actually quite a good pianist, but she said to me, she says, Matt, she says, it's a whole lot easier to press play and hear Horowitz than it is to practice. I said, but still practice. We didn't come up with this so that you wouldn't practice. So
yeah. Well, we're very excited to have the piano, housed in our academy. I promise this is going to be the last question. So what are the benefits to pianists working with a Stereo piano?
It's a good question. As I said, my personal experience, the first time that I had an opportunity to sit down and record on it, you have a whole different understanding of what it is you yourself are actually doing at the piano. As much as all of our mentors say, you play with your ears as much as you do with your hands. This takes that to a whole nother level. You're able to step away and hear exactly what you did. Every nuance, every color that you are thinking you're producing. Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but this is a way that you absolutely will know for sure this is what the audience is hearing. And I think that the ability for pianists, both as performers and as pedagogues, to be able to experience music that happened in real time so authentically and accurately within both a self-study session or within a guided coaching session is invaluable. We can tell our students until we're blue in the face, less pedal, that's blurry. Or we can say, emphasize, exaggerate what you're doing in the phrasing or the dynamics until we're blue in the face. But until that student actually hears it for themselves and grasps that concept, and for our own selves as we're developing our own artistry, until we experience it, it's really hard to fully grasp that concept. I fully expect that a generation from now, somebody's going to be having a similar interview to this, And one of the questions is going to be, how has Spirio changed piano pedagogy? How has Spirio made a better generation of pianists than what came before? And for me, in every facet of my career, that is a thrilling proposition.
I lied about the last question, but
you've got my undivided attention.
So when can we hear the Spirio piano with virtual orchestra? Is that something that can happen in the future?
That's something that our product development team is working on. And I don't want to make any promises or disclose any company secrets without and misrepresent something, but I can tell you that is something that is in the future, that it will be possible to hear orchestra and Spirio at some point in the near future.
So who knows, in the future with a hologram, it could be an incredible, we're looking forward to.
We could be watching virtual Horowitz hologram sitting at the piano.
Yeah, that would be really, really exciting. Really look forward to it. Yeah. Well, Dr. Bachman, it's so great to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And,
my pleasure. Thank you for the honor of, I didn't realize when I accepted this invitation that I was inaugurating this podcast. I am especially humbled and honored. So thank you so much for inviting me.
I learned a lot. And one more thing. So if, let's say, somebody's interested and they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I can be found at any of the Steinway galleries of Washington, D.C. I am very fortunate to be surrounded by these beautiful instruments in the entirety of the D.C., Virginia metro area.
Well, wonderful. So I look forward to seeing you again, especially after this COVID situation. And, thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
My pleasure. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.